Okay, so we're just gonna make a quick scene. So I'm gonna make a ground plane. And then I'm going to make my first rock shape. So for this rock shape, all I'm gonna do is just make a cube. And I'm gonna smooth it once. And I'm just gonna grab some vertexes, turn on soft select mode with B, and you can hold down B and change the scale of the soft select mode. You hold down B and left click and drag. The yellow areas are going to be full influence, and the red areas are going to be a gradient of influence, and then black is 0 influence. Okay, so put something like that. I'm just going to start making a simple rock shape. It doesn't have to be that crazy. I mean, you can spend a lot of time in the modeling phase, but for this, we're just doing this for example purposes. All right, so let's say that this is a perfect rock shape that we want. So first thing we need to do is we need to lay out UVs for this. So if I click on this, let's go to, I have a custom shell, which you can make as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to, this little button here deletes the history by type, or deletes type by history. And then this one freezes transformation, and this one centers the pivot. So the way that you do that in the menu over here is you go to modify, freeze transformations. First thing I'll do, go to edit, delete by type, history. And then I will center the pivot, which is this one. And I think that's modify, yes, center pivot. So just put center of the mass. All right, so now that we have that, let's name this rock 1. So now I have rock 1, the transform node, and my shape node. And I have my shading group and the material that's assigned to it. So first we need to, let's make some UVs for this before we start adding shaders. And for the ground plane, I'm actually going to do a similar thing. So let's just make a greasy influence a little bit. Doesn't have to be crazy. Just, this is a dirt ground plane that we're going to be using. Okay. Perfect. Rock and a ground plane. All right. So first thing we're going to do, I guess it's not first. All right. Now we're going to do is go to UV editor. And I want to go and get rid of these seams and these UVs that comes with it. So what I'll do is go up to UV camera based projection. And that just gets rid of, I'll hit B to turn off soft selection. What that does is that just gets rid of any seams, like we'd shown before in different tutorials and in class. So if I click this button here, it's called isolate select. So it's the only object selected. And I'm going to right click on the object, go to edge. And I'm just going to double left click some edges. So when I double click that, I just grabbed contiguous edges, hold down shift and do it again. Just double left click, and then hold down shift again and double click. And I'm just going through and finding a place to make a cut in my rock. So I'm going to cut off that bottom part. So if you go into the UV toolkit here, go down to cut and sew. And to get your UV toolkit open, you go to tools, and then it'll either say show UV toolkit if it's not up yet, or it'll say hide UV toolkit. So if I do that, it just brings it back and forth. All right, so hit cut. And you see it made a cut there. And another thing that I want to do is I want to cut up the side a little bit so that it can unwrap properly. So that white cut is the first cut I made. Then I will make one right here. So I have that selected there, make another cut. All right. Now that I have that, I'm going to select the UVs and I'm going to go to unfold. So that unfolds. So I selected all the UVs and unfolded it. If that didn't work for you, it means that your options are a little bit different. So what you need to do is just select a single UV, then hit unfold. Depending on how you have it set up, some of them are pin the selected UV and then unfold everything else around it, or it only is unfolding everything you have selected. So it's just a matter of like what your options are in whatever setup you have. So just try both if it doesn't work the first time. Okay, so I'm gonna turn on the checker and I'm gonna turn on texture dimming, and I'm gonna scale this down a little bit so they both fit on the same UV space. Fit it inside that 0, 1 space, and let's see what it looks like on the rock. There's definitely some stretching going on, but for our purposes, this is going to be fine. Okay, so we have our rock laid out. Let's isolate select that rock, and this ground plane it looks pretty good already, but since we did some deformations, I want to make sure that it's unfolded again, just so that we have a little less deformation. So you can see it actually moved it around a little bit because some areas are bigger than others here. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go over here and turn off the checker. All right, perfect. For now, we are done with UVs. So let's make a new project. So I'm going to go to project window and new and say rock demo. And you can call this whatever you want. And then put it in the location you want. Right now I just have it on my desktop. I'll hit rock demo, hit accept. And you can actually change the names of these if you want. Your folders, depending on however you want to set it up. So just hit accept. All right. Then we're going to go to file again, set project, and I'm going to go to rock demo. All right, and then I'll set that. So now when I go up to save as, it's going to go users, my desktop, rock demo, and go straight to your scenes. So I'll call this rock demo. Perfect. Always use underscore, do not use spaces. That's bad. Okay, so we have this rock demo saved. Great. So now what we need to do is add some of our shaders. So I'm going to left click on the object. Oh, let's name this ground plane as well. So I have the outliner over here. Should definitely have that. Sometimes it'll be floating like this. I just always set it over on the side here so that it's always there. That way you can easily select objects in your scene. All right, so let's rename this ground plane to ground plane. Perfect. All right, so now this is called ground plane. All right, so I'm going to click on this rock 01, and I'm going to right click, assign new material, and in my little filter here, I'll type AI standard. Just AI stand is enough. AI standard surface. To bring over my my attributes here. I have my attribute editor and my channel layer next to each other, so they can be broken off like this, or they're all on the same side. I like to have it so that it's just set up like this. So on my second monitor, they're just both together so that I can see attributes and my channels at the same time instead of having to go back and forth. Okay, so here's my shading group, and here's my shader. So for now, I'm just going to make this red because I actually wanted to show you mixing before anything else. So I'm going to turn down the specular all the way, and now it's just a red surface. Okay, perfect. Rock in the ground plane here. All right, and then let's turn on the Arnold renderer. I actually have the Arnold renderer docked into my setup. So you'll probably have it like this whenever you open the Arnold renderer. So what you can do, if you have 2018, you can take this Arnold renderer and you can see that blue line there. You can dock it into the same panel. That way you can just kind of see them both at the same time. So I'm going to run IPR. It should be black because there's no lights. So let's make some lights. So I'll go to Arnold, Lights, Sky Dome. Click that. All right. And I just keep storing this off screen onto my other monitor, but just so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so I'm just gonna assign an HDR like we always do. And for this one, I have my HDR stored here. Let's see. This one will work. All right, so I'm gonna click on my Sky Dome here and go to the transform node, is where you name things. So HDR Sky Dome. Perfect. Now I'm going to go back to the actual shader part of it, and then make sure that it is a lat long, which it is. And I also want to go to the texture again and make sure that it's in raw. So this is where I mapped the texture here, the HDR. So I will hit this little arrow, and it'll open up my texture for that file, and I'll go down to the color space where it says sRGB, and I will scroll up to raw. That is the format for a .exr because it needs the full range of color inputs. Okay, perfect. Now I'm going to move this off screen. Let's run another IPR. Think here for a minute. Okay. All right. Another thing I want to do is let's create a camera that we can always render from. So I'll go to create cameras, camera. Now that it's created this camera here at the origin, I'm going to go to panels, look through selected with the camera selected. That'll look inside the camera. Now I'm just tumbling around like you would in the perspective window. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is go to view, camera settings, resolution gate, view, camera settings, overscan. And what that does is just make sure that since this aspect ratio of my view here is a little wonky, it just shrinks everything down so that I can always see, no matter whatever the scale of this window is, I can always see what the real resolution gate and view of that camera is, no matter how big this. All right, so I'm gonna move it to about like this. All right, and then let's name this camera. So in the outliner here, you just double click here, render cam. That works. All right, now that we have a name for it, go into render camera. Well, first we have to update the scene so that it can pick up this camera. So right now it's only reading this perspective shape. So let's go to update full scene, then go to camera, and now it's actually rendering full cam anyway, rendering the cam anyway. Okay, because we had it selected here. So now I'm going to go into panels, go back to my perspective. That way I can move around and leave that camera alone. One thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to select the HDR dome here and the renderable camera here. So I just shift selected them, and I'm going to bring my channel box over here, and I'm going to add them into a group. So let's see, create new layer. And the reason I did that is because I want to turn on reference mode. That way I cannot select them. Just so when I'm working, I don't have to worry about selecting them. So we'll call this cam HDRI. So we know, make that yellow. Doesn't really matter what color. Okay, now they're in a group together, and I can only select my ground plane and my rock. That way that I don't have to worry about selecting these by accident. I just do that for anything that I don't want to be selecting, or that once it's set, it doesn't matter. You can actually still go into panels, go to perspective and go to your render cam and still move your camera, which is fine. And when you come back here, it's still, you can't select it. Another thing you could do is just go into view. Show. And you can actually turn cameras off so you can't see them. That way you wouldn't select it anyway. But I tend to like to see where it is, you know, just so that I can get a really quick view of where the camera's coming from. Okay, so now let's make the mixer. So I'm going to click on the rock again, and I'm going to right click, assign new material. Let's call this AI, or we need to get the aiMixer shader. So I will get that. All right, so let's open up our Hypershade. Have the Hypershade off screen over here. All right, so let's do the rock. So in these tabs here, like I said before, it's a good practice to use these tabs so that you can build out networks pretty big and you don't have to keep putting them in. All right, and I always turn on the grid as well. It's just a way to keep everything organized. I think this is snap to grid or something, so everything is snapping to the grid. But just using grid, for some reason, I like it better. So, all right. So for the AI mix shader here, we need to name this. So over here in my Hypershade, this is the AI mix, and then in my attributors, I can see it here. So let's call this the rock dirt mix material. And I always just suffix everything with what it is. So if it's a material, I do MTL, all capital. If it's a light, I'll do LGT. Just something like that, so you can, you know, better keep track. So this is going to be my rock dirt mix because it's my AI mixer. And then I'm going to go back to my AI standard that I made that's red. And we're going to call this rock material. Even though it's just red right now, it's just for demonstration. So let's make another material. So instead of doing it the other way where I was right clicking on the object, I'm going to go into this area. Wait, first let's left click on the rock material and the mixer, and then right click and go to graph network. That way it's inside this network here. And then I'm going to left click on my rock material, my red one, and then I'm going to go to this node here, which is add selected nodes to graph. So I'll add that. I'll take the out color, put it into shader 1. Now, if we look at what's rendered, I think it still has, let me delete the history again and freeze transform. Yeah, because we did some UV work, so it was adding on there. Okay, so it's still, okay, yeah, so it has it attached. So it has the first rock material here. And if I turn it to 0, it's mixing this shader 1 100%. If I turn it to 1, it's mixing shader 2 100%, which is just black. So right now it doesn't really matter because we're just going to map this to a texture file whenever we're ready. Or actually we're going to do a mixture between a texture file and a ramp, a 3D ramp. Okay, so now we're going to make the next texture, or the next shader, the dirt shader, which is just for now going to be a blue material. So let's bring the Hypershade over here again, and I'm in my rock tab here, and I have my rock material, my rock mixer, and my shading network. My what is that called? Shading group node here that has my surface, and it'll have my displacement maps as well. All right, so I'm going to hit tab and type AI standard surface right here. Okay. And for this one, I'm going to plug this into shader 2. And one thing that we need to do is we need to name this so that we can keep track of it. So click on this shader. Let's call this dirt material. Okay, so we have the dirt material. So right now, let's make it green, just so we can very easily tell what is what. All right, since they're mixing 50-50. We're getting a mixture between red and green right now. So I'm actually going to turn down the specularity as well, just so you can very easily tell what's going on. All right. So I'm going to click on my rock shader. I closed channel box and attributes. Let's open those back. All right. So now we have our mixer here. So when I left click on that, you'll see when I'm blending between these two, this is right now just doing a straight opacity blend in between each one. So 0 is shader 1, and white or 1 is shader 2. So if you painted a black and white map, all the areas that are black are going to be red, all the areas that are white are going to be green, and anything in between is going to be a mixture between those two colors or those two shaders. All right, so right now I'm just going to have it as 0 because it doesn't matter, because we're going to map something to it. All right, so what we're going to make is I want to make a mix that is a 3D ramp, so that it's going to, I'm going to create basically where this ground plane level is. So anything that intersects with this ground plane is going to start getting dirt attached to it. So anything above, around a little bit above this ground plane is going to be rock. So we need a 3D ramp that's like almost like a volume to run and mix every object that I have attached inside this mix shader. So what we'll do is I will type tab and type ramp, and we want to do a ramp projection. All right. So we're going to have a bunch of files that it makes, or a bunch of nodes that it makes. So it has a ramp, a place 2D node, a projection node, and a place 3D node, place 3D texture node. This is the node that's actually doing all the work. We're not even using this node. So you could actually delete that node if you want, because we're actually overriding the projection. So we're just taking this ramp, which is this right here. So it's just going to be a black and white map that's mixing between black and white. And we're going to use V ramp. U ramp is just this way. Diagonal ramp is this way. Radial ramp is like in a circle. And circular ramp, box ramp, UV ramp, four corner ramp. And you can figure out different ways to use these. But for now, I'm just going to use V ramp because I want it to be up and down. So you can think of this ramp as this black area is all going to be dirt. This white area is all going to be rock. Actually, we need to flip these, because how we said earlier that white was dirt and black was rock. So we want white to be dirt, to mix to dirt, and black to be rock, the way that we're setting this up. Okay, so now that I have this ramp set up, I'm going to take the out color, and first we need to convert this RGB value, because this is not going to go into this mix because it's an RGB value. So remember, we need to have a single grayscale value. So I'm going to hit tab and type luminance, and luminance is a RGB conversion. So we're going to take the out color, put it into value, take out value. Now it can be mapped to the green. All right. So let's see what it did. All right. So you can see now it's that ramp in 3D space is mixing between the red and the green. But the problem is See this place 3D texture node here in my outliner. You can see it. I'm just gonna start moving it. As you can see, this is actually the 3D place node, this thing here. So if I scale it this direction, it's not going to do anything because it's already scaling from left to right infinitely. And you can't scale this direction because it's the same thing. It's scaling left to right infinitely. So what I want to do is I want to scale it in the Y direction. What that's going to do is it's going to start spacing out that ramp further and further. So let's say I want it to be scaled this much. So around this middle area of this projection, you can hear my daughter in the background being angry about something. You can move this down, and you can see in the middle of the ramp, in the middle of that projection is where the ramp starts to mix, which makes sense because this is the ramp. It's actually mapping the ramp to this value. So if I scrunch it down to really thin, you can see that it's mapping the ramp like 1, 2, 3, 4, you know. So if I keep scaling it down, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's basically infinitely scaling gradients, or those ramps, over and over and over again, depending on what the scale of this 3D projection node is. So I'm just going to stretch it out. All right. So green area is our dirt. Red area is rock. That's the way you can think of it. That way, once you have this set up, I'm just going to move this out of the way. Once you have this set up, I'll click on this rock, and it only applies dirt to it whenever it goes below that ramp section. That way you can make lots of different rocks and move them in and out of the ground, and they'll all together. So what I'll do now is let's attach the dirt to this ground plane. So I'm going to click on the ground plane, right click, go to assign existing material, which is this dirt. All right. So you can see now the green is the dirt and the red is the rock. Okay. So let's select this rock material again, and it will pull up this dirt rock mix material, and and now you can see that it's yellow because it's mapped to something. So I'm going to click on this little arrow here. It's going to bring me to my luminance value, which is, remember, it's remapping that RGB value. So I want to go into that as well. So I'll click that. And then this goes into our projection and our place 3D node, this is the scale that I made it. I was just scaling it in space, but you could actually type it as well. And then our ramp finally is here. So what I could do is I could make the ramp tighter or looser so that it would be a very sharp gradient or a very soft gradient. So if I made it like right on top of each other, you can see it gets tighter and tighter. So we actually do want a little bit of softness in the ramp. That way that we can, you want it to be almost fully green at the ground intersection point, so that there's, a good coverage of that. And then it kind of just fades off as it goes up. So if we just pulled that out, then it would so it would be zero dirt here, and then it would start mixing a little bit of dirt as it goes down. So one thing that we can do is we can actually mix this value into another value so that it kind of breaks up this this gradient. So first, let's actually turn these red and green materials into an actual rock and an actual dirt material, so that we can actually see a little bit more about what's going on. So for this, I'd say the mixing part is done. So I'll stop this video and we will move on to the texture portion of how all this stuff works. All right, I'll see you in the next video.